Okay. Remember, I keep mentioning 12th Corps. Well, here we go with 100 mil. That's what I love. Okay. By the way, this is 100 mil. If you haven't seen it, that's what it looked like. And that's where difficult run goes under 100 mil today. That's where that was located. And this mill goes back, as a matter of fact, it's the first Stephen Lewis mill. It goes back in the mid-1700s. Hunter bought it at auction in 1832. And that's when 100 Mill Road became 100 Mill Road. Before then, it wasn't 100 Mill Road. It's called something else. But anyway, on the 17th of June, after marching 25 miles the previous day in that searing heat with his troops falling out dead, basically, dropping out, they got orders to secure Leesburg. So they got up early, and they marched from Fairfax Courthouse down to Oakton, Flint Hill back then, made a left to go north, and marched right up 100 Mill Road. Now, they got to 100 Mill, and that's where they ate breakfast. After breakfast, they marched about 2.5, 3 miles further up, just beyond where the one-lane bridge is on 100 Mill Road, Colvin Run. On the left, they got orders to halt and encamp, and they were happy. But remember, the heat was oppressive and terrible. And I want to read a quote from General Williams. He was commander of the 1st Division of 12th Corps. Either by accident or design, the dry old grass of the fields and woods got on fire and filled the air with smoke and additional heat. So one way or the other, that heat helped create a massive fire that took place.
Is sunstroke ever fatal?
Excuse me?
Is sunstroke ever fatal?
Ever fatal? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, big time. It's like super refill when you don't have enough liquids. Yeah. So yes, it is very much so. It can be very fatal. Anyway, so, and here we go with the temperature. It was brutal. We're talking in the hundreds. And they have all this gear on, and they're marching up 100 Mill Road. So they stop it in camp right beyond Colvin Run Mill. Excuse me, it's beyond Colvin Run. The other photo is a fellow, he's a sergeant, and he was in the 12th Corps. He was one of the fellows that marched up the road that day. And I had his great-grandson on one of my tours recently who showed me the rifle that Jay Fairbanks carried up Hunter Mill Road. He's elderly, he could not make it tonight. We had really tried to have him come with and hold the gun. That was one of my theatrics. It did not work tonight. But anyway, so this is a picture of Jay Fairbanks in 1875, and they had a reunion here at Gettysburg on Culp's Hill in 1907, and there's Jay Fairbanks, right there. Now, let me ask you all, has anybody here heard about, well, I know a few people have, are you familiar with Culp's Hill? You heard about Cemetery Hill? Have you heard about Pickett's Charge? Of course, right? They get all the hype. The movies, like Moby Dick. It wasn't, you know, Moby Dick was written in 1853. But until Gregory Peck got on that white, nobody knew anything about it. So anyway, the same thing here. The 12th Corps was the barb of the Union's famous fishhook line, forming the extreme right of the Union line at Gettysburg. Now, I want to tell you something I bet you don't know. That hill was so strategic that if the Confederates had won the battle on the 2nd day of July, and the 2nd day of battle, they would have been able to walk right into the rear of the Union line And it is doubtful Pickett's charge would have ever taken place. That's how close the Confederates came. But they did not take that hill. Okay?
Let me pick up now with back to the Second Corps again. We mentioned they came across it, Wolf Run Shoals. They got there late in the afternoon of June the 17th, June the 16th, and they camped that evening. Some of the men went down and cooled off in the water. Some of them got chased out by a bunch of snakes and came back up. But the next morning, they were on the road again, went to Fairfax Station, and from there, they went 2 miles west along Pope's Head Creek and ended up at a place called Sangster Station. Now, you go down Fairfax Station Road, take a left on Colchester, it really peters out, and you go through a little tunnel. Right on the other side of that tunnel is where Sangster Station used to be. There isn't any physical evidence of the thing that sets in it right now, but we do know that the Second Corps had camped there for 2 days as they were waiting, as the other corps were being repositioned around that. We know that, we know that there were blockhouses that were put across at 5 different points along the rail line. Now, at least 2 of them, maybe 3, were actually constructed. The wood was put out there. Here's a picture, period picture. Here's a blockhouse that sits up on the corner. This is the rail line going across one of the bends in Pope's Head Creek, which is the old track road from along from Fairfax Station. We know that the Second Corps camped along here, mostly on Colchester Road, but we also know they were on the other side that set in here. Now, from here they got orders to head for Centerville, and let me turn it back over to Jim.
You'll love this. Yes.
Blockhouse?
It's a blockhouse that was used for like a guard post,
Yeah.
if you will. Okay. How many people know Centerville? Everybody been out there? Have you ever seen anything look like that? It's still there. It just looks a little bit different. You have to go into the old section of Centerville to see this. And on June 20th, the Second Corps marched right through this village. And it was a village of about 200 people. They had a blacksmith, 3 churches, very, very small. But this right here, and these are Union soldiers, and they're guarding the area. But on June the 20th, the Second Corps marched right down here, and this is Braddock Road. And they turned west right here. Now, if you've ever been in this section, that's the old stone church. And that was built in 1852 and eventually got burned up during the Civil War. But it was a hospital before it burned up. Anyway, they came down here and they went west. Anyone have a clue what road that is? That's Warrenton Turnpike.
Could I mention something? The Stuart Mosby Cavalry Museum is right there at that intersection.
It's right across here.
Right.
The Mosby Museum, right over here today. So anyway, this road right here is Warrenton Turnpike. Now back in the day, Warrenton Turnpike came, out of Fairfax City, courthouse, whatever, and it went up the way it goes today, Route 29 to 11, Lee Highway. But when it got to the old part of Centerville, it turned right. And it went through the village and made a left and left the village. That's because the village said, we don't want to bypass. We want them coming through our village and we want to sell them our wares. It wasn't until 1925 that the road was rerouted to today's configuration of Lee Highway. So, Second Corps came right down here, Braddock Road, went west, and they crossed Route 28, which would have been right here, and over here is Newgate Shopping Center, or the Shopping Plaza. Now, before 1792, so we're going back quite a few years, this area was called Newgate, hence Newgate Shopping Plaza. 1792, it became named Centerville. Anyway, those troops went beyond Route 28 and they encamped from the shopping plaza on out about a mile beyond where the turnoff is onto Route 66. And what they did was that after they settled in a little bit, some of them came into town and ransacked the local settlers and commissary tents looking for cheese, cakes, and tobacco. And the fella right here who was in charge of Centerville at that time, General Alexander Hayes, was so incensed. And by the way, he was a classmate of Hancock. But his guys were messing around with the commissary and everything. So he moved the Second Corps even further out. Obviously not making Hancock very happy, but that's what he did. The following morning, Second Corps headed on out towards Thoroughfare Gap. Now, one other thing before I go. This Centerville's pretty cool. There are two defensive lines that were built, and this is by the Confederates during the winter encampment of late 1861. And these are the earthworks. There are two of them that were out there. So you get a feel for it. Right? Now, one other thing. I mentioned there are some remnants still out there. Here you go. This is Mount Gilead. This was Johnston, who was the commander of the Confederates, winter headquarters in 1861-62. That's where he set up shop. Now, if you walk over here just a little ways, you'll see earthworks. If you walk, just continue through these trees, you'll see the earthworks continue into this development. And there's a Civil War Trails marker right up here. 2 blocks away is the artillery, one of the artillery batteries. By the way, there are numerous miles and trenches and rifle pits in this area. It was humongous, quite frankly. And here's one of the artillery batteries, and this is a great example of preservation because I've got a picture at home. 4 years ago, you couldn't see this. It was all trees and briars and all of that. The neighborhood got together and preserved it. It's beautiful. If you go out west on 29, 1 mile, you come to Stone Road, you make a right, go back 8/10 of a mile, and you'll see their northern line. That is still there. It's also called Battery Ridge to this very day. Right?
We pick up a little bit of our situation maps here, and Jimmy mentioned that Hooker had repositioned the corps out there. And basically what he was trying to do was to reorient them along Leesburg Pike and Little River Turnpike. A defense in depth, if you will, to protect against Lee turning away from the Shenandoah River and coming this direction. So what we wanted to talk about here was the Second Corps was down at Thoroughfare Gap. In the meanwhile, A.P. Hill had gotten up into the Shenandoah, or excuse me, in the Shenandoah Valley, and was headed down the valley, and Longstreet's First Corps was sitting there, up near Williamsport at this particular point. Hooker still had problems trying to find where these happened. And it wasn't until June 24th that a lot of these things were going to change. Now, on June 24th, Robert E. Lee decided to send these 2 corps against across the Potomac River. Longstreet and his headquarters went across at Williamsport, and at Shepherdstown, this is where A.P. Hill went across. Now, a couple of anecdotal stories that happened along with this thing. As the soldiers came across the ford there at Shepherdstown, the regimental bands started to pick up Maryland, My Maryland, and each regiment, as they came across, kept it up. They added Dixie and the Bonnie Blue flag as they went across. One other story that came with it was there were some women that observed the crossing, and they were absolutely shocked because the Confederate soldiers came out stark naked. They were holding their uniforms and cartridges above their head to keep them dry as they came. Now, once Lee had sent them across the river, Hooker reacted quite fast. Now, this is to show basically that across northern Virginia, these tens of thousands of soldiers that we had in here, just to give you an idea of where some of them were tucked around. The corps and whatnot were on their way up. The 5th Corps was at Aldie, and he probably came up Route 15, headed towards Leesburg. We know that areas along in here on Leesburg Pike, the 1st Corps was a place called Guilford Station, which is Sterling. The 6th Corps was being picked up down here. It gathered its divisions together and put a frying pan to Leesburg Pike. And all of this took place specifically in accordance with a set of orders that came out of Hooker's headquarters. On June 25th, the following corps are going to do the following. This one goes to the upper bridge, this one goes to the other bridge. On June 26th, the 2nd Corps actually started to move, and it headed up towards Gum Springs, and we'll pick up that in a minute. But one thing I wanted to point out is that that brigade that was down at Wolf Run Shoals on the 25th of June was ordered to join the 1st Corps. And that left Wolf Run Shoals unguarded.
Okay. June 25, 7 a.m. Per Hooker's order, the 2nd Corps, as Brian mentioned, began to move towards Gum Spring. At the same time, Stewart had been given latitude, supposedly, to do an end run on Hooker's army on the way to support Ewell up in Pennsylvania. So what he did, he had selected 3 brigades. We're talking 5,000 men, 6 guns, ambulance, caissons full of ammunition, all of that. They left Salem and they traveled through New Baltimore at 29 to 11 on his now very controversial ride to support Lee up north in enemy territory. Mid-morning, who should they come across? Voila, our 2nd Corps. And that's where they hit it, right here. Here's the 2nd Corps, and Stewart had come out of Salem, gone up, and his intent was to cut across there, Rousers, and head on up. But what happened? He ran into the 2nd Corps, and he couldn't get through them, he couldn't get around them. And there was a little skirmish, some artillery rounds were shot, exchanged, infantry deployed, and a small number of casualties occurred on both sides. Now, this is critical. This incident gave Jeb Stuart, Confederate cavalry commander, pause, because he didn't see how he could get through it. So, he decided to go on a more circuitous route, one that turned and anticipated 4 to 5 days, 90-mile journey into 155 miles and 8 days, which, bottom line, he got to Gettysburg too late to be of any help for Lee. And that's why Lee's famous words are, "Where are you? You're my eyes and my ears, and you're not here to help me locate my army properly." So, again, here's the anticipated route that he took, and here's what he ended up doing.